I've got to give credit to the Prime Minister today with his move on the new Foreign Relations Bill. This is about sorting out our federation, about reasserting Canberra's constitutional responsibility for the nation's foreign policy.
We need to ensure that Australia, not just at a federal level but across all of our governments, speak with one voice, act in accordance with one plan, consistent with the national interest as set out in Australia's foreign policy as determined by the federal government. And the new Australian Foreign Relations Bill does just that. Drawing on the powers available to in the Constitution, it enshrines those powers and provides very clear directions to do a number of important things.
So under this law, agreements by state governments with foreign governments can be cancelled, and they need to get federal approval for future agreements. There are already more than 100 of these agreements in place. But the main trigger for this, pretty obviously, is the decision by Daniel Andrews and his Labor government in Victoria to sign up to China's Belt and Road Initiative, a deal the federal government had steered clear of. And this reasserting of federal government control over the issue and this policy area is something I've been calling for here as far back as 2018. China wants Australia to sign up to Belt and Road, and the Australian government, our foreign policy is no, we don't sign up to it. We do look at issues case by case. So they get the second largest state in this country to sign up to it anyway. Now, what would Daniel Andrews know about the security and defence implications of this sort of engagement with China? We know he just wants Chinese investment, and good on him. But he's in no position to make these broader strategic judgments. That's the province of the federal government. That, as I said at the outset, is why we have a federal government. Clearly, Victoria's overstepped the mark here, but Canberra's got to step in. Canberra's got to throw its weight around, bring Victoria to heel, and explain that it has responsibility for external affairs, it has responsibility for our foreign policy, and it can't possibly have a state running off and running foreign policy effectively at odds with our national foreign policy. Look at it from China's point of view. Divide and conquer. They couldn't get the federal government to do what they want. They've got a state government, the second largest state, to do just what they want. Yeah, so there you go. That's the rationale. The dilemma has been there and it's been building for years. It's good to see some action coming from the Prime Minister. He's already won support from the Labor opposition, which kind of puts them at odds with their state colleagues. Still, it raises the question now, if Canberra can reaffirm its constitutional rights over foreign relations, and yes, good on them for doing that, what about reasserting the need for open trade and movement between state borders? Borders closed and patrolled around the country because of the pandemic.
Australia wasn't built to have internal borders. Having internal borders in Australia is an extreme response, which can be necessary in extreme circumstances and based on a proper medical advice and a very transparent process for doing that. And we saw that in relation to the New South Wales-Victorian border. What occurred there was cooperation between the neighbouring states and indeed the Commonwealth, the appointment of a border commissioner to try and resolve the many heartbreaking examples that we continue to work through today. And, you know, when borders get put up within a country like Australia, it is very difficult to try and avoid the sort of circumstances we've seen occur. Very, very difficult to do that.
Yeah, so the Prime Minister doesn't like the closed borders. He just can't do much about them except lobby for good sense, like what we've been doing here too, I suppose. In the long term, though, I think we might need some clarity here, some legislation, or perhaps we'll get some guidance from the Clive Palmer High Court case against Western Australia, or perhaps just some transparent and clear national arrangements through the National Cabinet. Something has to give because the current arrangements are simply not good enough.